Hey friends, welcome back. We are doing another book review. We are going to be doing The Meaning of Marriage by Timothy and Kathy Keller. Let's jump in. Well, now that I'm in my fiance era in my life, having got engaged a handful of months ago, something that I and my fiance have been going through are a couple books on marriage, and just going through lots of just discussions and trying to figure out what does a godly and Christian marriage look like, and trying to set the foundation for that and have these conversations early on, which I highly recommend if you are in a serious committed relationship because these conversations matter and you want to start setting your relationship on a good foundation that you can build upon later so that your marriage is honoring to God. Because when you do your marriage and your life the way that God designed it to be done, you'll find so much more joy and fulfillment and ultimately a form of success in that than when you try to work outside of his perfect and good and beautiful design. That's ultimately going to end up with disappointment and hurt and unfulfillment. So I love this book because it sets that foundation and talks through lots of the things that they had to learn as they figured out their marriage and their relationship through the years. So they start the book by trying to unpack a biblical and Christian view of marriage. What is the purpose of marriage? What's the meaning of marriage? Why did God create it? And how did he create it to be lived out? They give a vision of the purpose of marriage, arguing that marriage isn't about happiness, but about holiness. That when you truly love the other person, you commit to them and you want to help pull out God's image within them. That you ultimately sanctify one another and you pull each other up closer to God, not further away, and not keeping someone where they're at. That when you enter into a marriage relationship, it's similar to how when you enter into a relationship with God, you commit to change. None of us who enter into a relationship with God wanting to be saved from who we are and the life we've lived want to stay the same. We want God to change us. Now, marriage, they argue, is one of the most sanctifying things you can enter into because when you do life with someone else, you have to sacrifice. You have to be committed to change and to the good of the other person. If you're committed to another Christian, as it should be, then they're going to be committed to helping you and committed to change themselves too. So they argue that marriage is not about happiness, but holiness. When you commit to holiness and trying to help the other person be more holy, then you're ultimately going to find more fulfillment and happiness in the end. But if you commit to happiness, then you will find neither happiness nor holiness in the end, which is something similar to what something C.S. Lewis said in Mere Christianity. They also talk about gender roles and how they figured that out, work and raising kids, and lots of troubles that they had to go through and conversations they had to have and arguments they went through, how they figured out what it looks like to be a team and to raise a family together and to work alongside each other, to be partners and friends, or as they like to say, to be friends and lovers. So in this book, they're just going to unpack the vision of marriage. What is it? How did God create it to be lived out? And why even modern statistics point to the value of trying to do it the way that God's word has said it should be done for thousands of years. But then they also talk through maybe more pressing questions that you might have that they experienced, they went through, and they had to figure out themselves, or maybe things you haven't even thought of yet because you're not married. But like me, it's something that'd be helpful to have thought about beforehand. I'd never have thought of this apart from reading the book because I haven't been married yet. But now that I've read it, it's given that foundation of some level of understanding that I can build from and work from in the future. So I found this book very helpful and I love reading it with my fiance. So if you're in that phase or if you're in a committed relationship, I recommend reading it together, going through a chapter and then coming back and talking about your takeaways. So I'm going to ultimately judge this book on two things, the readability and the usability. Now, as far as the readability goes, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. Now, you'll understand why. I think the highest of this book, but it has about 7 chapters. It's got some appendices at the end, but I'm just going to count the 7 chapters. And then it's got about 220 pages in those 7 chapters. So each chapter is about 30 pages long. If you know me, I like shorter chapters. It's just easier on my attention span. I much rather sit down and read several short chapters than have to cut a long chapter in half and come back to it later. I like to just sit through it and soak it all up in one go. So it was a bit longer for me. And for that reason, it was a bit harder to take everything in at one go. I had to stop several times. So I would have rathered if it were shorter chapters, there were more of them and they would have done more topical. But ultimately, I was able to do it. It's very conversational. It feels like they're just telling you stories, unpacking vision. So it is very readable. Though there's a lot in there, it doesn't feel dense. So that's why I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. The chapters are a bit longer than what I like, but it was still very readable. And I was able to get through it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed them unpacking their lives, just being honest and exposed with us about the things they had to go through and learn, and letting us learn those things alongside them, to say it that way. So as far as readability goes, a 3 out of 5. As far as usability goes, I want to give it a 5 out of 5 because it's already helped me and my fiance talk through stuff and figure stuff out that we probably wouldn't have figured out until a decade into our marriage. Otherwise, it probably would have been a lot harder, the bumps we would have had to experience before even talking about some of the principles and things that they learned that they get to unpack about raising kids together, about being married, about being partners and friends and lovers, about following God together and trying to help sanctify each other and pull each other up in faith. And how does that look? How do you do that in a good way that's helpful and edifying and not just discouraging? So I want to give it a 5 out of 5 on usability, because it does help you set that foundation and already start building things in place in your relationship to have a relationship that honors God and that is fulfilling to yourself and that builds the other person up. So overall, I'm going to give this book a solid 8 out of 10. Is that 5 out of 5, 3 out of 5? Yeah, that's 8. So I definitely want to recommend that you pick this up if you are engaged or if you're working towards that. If you're wanting to have some of those deeper conversations with your significant other to set that foundation. If you want to know, what does it look like to have a godly marriage? Maybe you didn't have that modeled for you, or maybe there's just stuff you haven't had to think about. Because you did have that modeled for you, but you don't know all the ins and outs of it. So definitely want to recommend that you pick it up. I'll leave a link down below so that you can do that. But if you do, then I'd love to hear what you think about it. And I'll come back soon with some more book reviews. So I hope you found this helpful. Hope you'll go pick it up. Definitely a great book on marriage. But having said that, if you found this helpful, then please subscribe down below for more content just like this. Like the video and share it with someone else that you think would like to pick this up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.